Okay, so what we're going to first start off is just talking about some important things about this chapter, which is measuring length, weight, volume, and temperature. So the important things here is that in many cases it's mostly about estimating measurements, right? What you mostly it's you mostly going to be estimating and approximating, and basically that means you're not 100% certain with the answer. You probably will have a range of answers, but if it's in a very good range, it can be quite correct, right? So that's basically just of estimation of measurements, and you'll be using different measuring instruments to accurately measure, like for instance, length and distance, weight or mass, volume, and temperature, right? And yeah, I mean, you need to calculate the cost of materials based on the quantity, and that is something I think you've done in your previous chapters. Um, so yeah. So the first thing that we're going to look at is just basically maybe the tools that they use to estimate and measuring length and distance, right? So the first one, especially when you're looking at map work, is probably with a ruler, measuring tape when you're working like hands-on, uh, um, a turner wheel, an odometer as well, right? An odometer or odometer, yes. They even gave us the pronunciation, so that's good. So yes, it's pro odometer, and there you measure the speed. The other one you measure the rotations, the length, and so on, right? So these are just some of the things or that they use to measure that. And then we also have measuring of mass and weight. And here you can use scales, right, where you measure the weight and mass. You find all kinds of different scales. You can find the scale which you'd find in the kitchen. Here you'd find in a shopping mall, or when they are scaling like maybe a fish that you have just caught. Also in the bathroom when you want to measure yourself. Also in clinics, doctors, and so on and so forth. So measuring scales are quite important in our society. And also we have measuring of volume, and measuring of volume is quite important when it has to come to cooking. So you have spoons and cups that have a specific milliliter or liters quantity of volume and so on, and jugs and also flasks, right? And then we also talk about like the measuring and monitoring of temperature, right? And that's quite important as well, because you would know that we do have different types of measuring temperature, only two, which is the Kelvin and Celsius and Fahrenheit. Yes, and Fahrenheit, those three that I can remember right now. So yeah, and the measuring and monitoring of temperature, basically you can use a thermometer, right? Right, a normal thermometer. You can have outdoor thermometer. You can have stove dial where you can accurately say that okay, this is the temperature that I want it to be, and yeah, so on, right? And how much time we should spend, right? So those were just things that are used to measure either time, temperature, and all those other things, right? But now, when we are talking about this chapter, as we're doing math literacy, is that types of questions that we get are contextual questions, where you have a context and you have to answer certain question about that context. So the examples of these types of questions that you could see here, unfortunately, we can't do something that has to do with maybe using a ruler, unfortunately here, because it is online and it's a bit difficult for me to accurately represent those things using ruler on here, right? So, yeah. So the first question here is Mary wants, or example is basically that Mary wants to host a dinner party, so she finds a great recipe for chicken curry that serves 6 people, but she has invited 10 people to her dinner party, right? It serves 6 people, but she invited 10 people, right? And now these are the ingredients, and it's a long list of ingredients. I can see there's chicken, there's onions, there's ginger, there's garlic, there's some vegetable oils, there's pepper, there's yogurt, there's water, there's teaspoons, and all these different types of ingredients, right? Now, now the first question here is that how much chicken should Mary use for the meal, right? So how much chicken should she use for the meal? Now, the answer to this one is that basically, since you already know that it's 1.25 kilograms of chicken pieces, right? But then you can serve, it says here, the recipe, she finds a great recipe for curry that serves 6 people. So the amounts that they've given you for each and every single ingredient, when it's all put together, right? It's supposed to give you for 6 people, but now you want to serve how much chicken should you use to serve the meal for 10 people, right? So she needs to increase it. So you need to first say, okay, this 1.25 kilograms of chicken pieces would have been enough for 6 people. Therefore, when you divide it by 6, then you get per person, right? You get for a single person how many chicken pieces they would consume, which is 0.208 kilograms, right, per person. And then after that, then you multiply it by 10 because now she's invited 10 people instead of inviting just 6 to keep the serving the same, right? So you multiply by 10, and therefore it tells you that, okay, in actual fact, she must add to the meat 2.0. So she needs to get 2.08 kilograms for 10 people, right? And that's how much chicken she'll need to serve, right? And B, if one onion has the equivalent mass of 210 grams, approximately how many onions must Mary add to the meal? So again, this is an approximate. If one onion has the equivalent of 210 grams, right? So for one, right, for one onion, and when we look at onions here, you have 350 grams of onions, and they are peeled. Let's see if there's more here. No, okay. And so, how do you calculate this one? So you have 350 grams for everyone, right? Which is the 6 people. I mean, not for everyone, but for the 6 people that these ingredients are served for, right? These ingredients are made to serve 6 people. So then you divide it by 6, you get 5.58.33. And then once you get 58.33, you multiply it by 10 for 10 people, right? So now it's for 10 people. But now, the question said, remember, how many onions must Mary add to the meal, right? So now we know that for an equivalent one onion, it's 210 grams. Therefore, this 583.33 grams, we must divide by the 210 grams, and then we get that it is 2.78 grams. But because it's an approximate, we can also just say, basically, when you buy it, I don't think you can actually get a 0.7 onion, or you're only going to get 3 onions. You're going to get like 2 onions. So, in actual fact, the final answer here should be 3, because when you buy it, then it should be 3 onions. Okay. And then the next two questions that we look at, and we're going to look at it a bit quicker. How many teaspoons of yogurt must Mary add to the meal, right? And again, these questions, I'd like for you to stop the video wherever you want to try it out on your own, and then do it, and then let it play, and so on, so that you can try out some of the things on your own, right? So how many teaspoons of yogurt must Mary add to the meal? And so here we know that it has 4 tablespoons, and because it's 4 tablespoons for the 6 people, you divide it by 6, and then you multiply it by 10 for the new number of people that are invited, and you find that it's 6.23. 6 of 2/3 tablespoons of plain yogurt must be added to the meal, right? Again, and then Mary does not want to use a tablespoon, as she wants to add all the ingredients in milliliters instead. Calculate how many milliliters of yogurt Mary must add to the meal, right? And again, this is also going back to the previous chapters I think you have done in the first or second term of conversions, where you need to be able to convert tablespoons into milliliters, and in this case it is 6 over 2/3 tablespoons, and you're converting it, and they did give us the conversion that for a single tablespoon it is actually equals to 15 milliliters. So we multiply it by 15, and so we get 100 milliliters of yogurt, right? Okay. And then we also have the last two questions for this particular section is that um, how much water in milliliters does Mary need to add to the meal for 10 people? And still, again, you take what was given for the recipe that serves 6 people and you divide it by 6 to give you for a single person, right? How much water for a single person that is supposed to be there, but then you multiply it by 10 so that you can find the new answer for 10 people. So then it's 950 milliliters of water. And then how many pints of water does Mary add to her meal, right? And so again, you know that it's 570 milliliters, so you divide that by you've already found that it's 950 milliliters for the 10 people. So now you divide it by 570 because you want to know how much pints the she needs to add, and so it's it's one of 2/3 pints, right? And then the last question where it talks about Gary, and so with Gary, it says Gary is organizing a soccer fan day for his local soccer club to raise funds. He has to organize drinks for halftime and for after each game for all the teams that enter the tournament, right? And then A, it says 6 teams enter the tournament, and each team plays every other team once to determine the top 4 teams, who will then play 2 semifinals and final match. How many games in total will be played at the tournament? If there are 14 members of each team, please substitute how many players in total, and the last question, right? So unfortunately, because of time, I'll have to stop here, but the answers to these 3 questions for this one is as follows. It's A, B, and C over there, right? So there's A, B, and C. Other than that, I really hope that these videos are helpful, and I'll see you next time.